Good afternoon, everyone, and to be respectful of everyone's time, it's 4:02, so let's get started. My name is Jeffrey Sims, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Health Policy and Management, but also the interim Associate Dean for Inclusive Excellence here at Gillings. And I'd like to welcome you to one of our first community conversations for the academic year. And this community conversation is focused on inclusive excellence in our action plan that we have implemented and that we've continued to work on over the last several years, and that we will continue to work on. It's a blueprint for the entire school as to how we are approaching inclusive excellence. Next slide, please. As we begin this conversation, I'd like to take the opportunity and the time to make sure that we do our land acknowledgement, and that is that North Carolina is home to the Occaneechi, the Lumbee, the Coharie, the Haliwa-Saponi, the Eastern Band of Cherokee, the Meherrin, the Saponi, the Tuscarora, the Waccamason, and many other indigenous people. We also want to acknowledge and honor the crucial role of enslaved people in the early days of our campus. Enslaved people were sold as escheated property to help fund the establishment of UNC, and the labor of enslaved people built UNC Chapel Hill. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to take this time to introduce you to the Inclusive Excellence team, the core team. We actually have more members of, actually, let me stand back and state, first of all, everyone is a part of the Inclusive Excellence team here at Gillings. These are the core team members here that you see on this slide, and you'll hear from many of these team members today during our presentation. Yesenia Marino is our Director of Education and Training. Haley Mason is one of our program coordinators. Trevor Hamlet is our Inclusive Excellence Graduate Assistant. And then Trinette Cooper is the Manager of Inclusive Excellence and Outreach. So our objectives for today are to define the role of inclusive excellence at Gillings, to report on progress in our Inclusive Excellence Action Plan and state the future priorities, describe implementation and evaluation of our Inclusive Excellence Action Plan, and to hear and integrate input from the Gillings community about our revised Inclusive Excellence Action Plan. And now I want to turn it over to my colleague Yesenia, who will take it from there.
Thanks, Jeffrey. If you want to go on to the next slide. Thanks. Just a little bit of history regarding how the action plan came about. We actually first started working on what we now refer to as the Inclusive Excellence Action Plan back at the beginning of 2019. Those that have been around there long enough are aware of the point in time where we were as a campus. That was when the Confederate statue on campus was toppled, and that was sort of a flashpoint for the need for Gillings to organize in a more intentional way to meet the needs of our community and to help foster a more inclusive environment. And so over the course of that spring semester and that summer, we worked in teams working with students, faculty, staff, and I believe a few alumni to draft what was originally supposed to be a series of recommendations. But as we worked through it, we realized that it really was, as Jeffrey said, a blueprint for the work that we should be doing. And so as part of that, we formed the Inclusive Excellence Council that following academic year, which is a combination of students, faculty, and staff from across the school. We are now also thankfully including alumni and making sure that we have representation from all degree programs and delivery modalities. And their work continues today. They meet regularly to coordinate the progress of the action plan, provide input from other parts of the Gillings community, and help guide us in the work that we're doing. So now that it's been a couple of years, we wanted to reassess where we were, look at some of the accomplishments that we've had, and see what it is that we need to do to pivot to continue to meet the needs of the community. So as part of today's conversation, we are planning to take our revisions to Dean's Council, see if they have any additional input, and then we're just going to continue to charge ahead based on the revised action plan. Feel free to go. Thank you. So as you will hear in more detail, we have 6 focus areas. The 6th one was part of that revision process, realizing that we needed some additional focus in research specifically. In addition to that, we have focus areas related to training, our curriculum across the school, communication, advocacy, and representation. And I will actually let Trevor lead us in talking a little bit about some of them.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. I'm going to go through the first 3 of the focus areas, beginning with training. And this area focuses on requiring inclusive excellence training, including a strong anti-racist component for our faculty, staff, and our teaching assistants. Next slide, please. And here are some of the overarching goals. We want everyone who is in a position of power to share a common understanding of what an inclusive excellence environment looks like and does not look like. And we want to make sure that we're acting on that understanding. And we want all instructors to be able to facilitate inclusive and respectful discussions about sensitive topics like racism and other forms of oppression. And we want all members of the Gillings community to uphold the values of inclusion and respect when we interact with each other. And next slide, please. And these are some of our priorities to communicate more effectively about training opportunities and requirements for faculty, staff, and students. We want to clarify what it means to be an expert in equity and inclusive excellence training and adjust our team and approval criteria accordingly. And we want to redefine our metrics for success in training and explain that qualification criteria for the different levels of training. And our second area of focus is curriculum, where we are wanting to require social justice and racial equity training at orientation, in the curriculum, and in the classroom. And some of the goals here are that all students graduate with the ability to apply social justice and racial equity principles in their public health work. We want racism, social justice, and health equity to be more seamlessly integrated throughout the curriculum. And we want discussions that are led by instructors, that their instructors are capable of effectively facilitating dialogue on topics of racism and oppression. And some of the priorities in this focus area are to evaluate and improve the curriculum and the training provided to students in health equity, social justice, and human rights concentration, support faculty in evaluating and improving public health research and practice methods and how they're taught, and develop a summary of Gillings courses that have an equity focus. And we want to share that widely. And the third area is communication, where we are trying to significantly improve approaches to communicating about inclusion, equity, and anti-racism. And the goals here are to effectively communicate our plans, action statements, events, and successes about inclusive excellence to all constituents. We want to create a visual environment that communicates our commitment to inclusion. And our priorities in this focus area are to refocus the work of the Arts Committee to help refresh photographs, arts, and displays that we have across Gillings School and on the website. And we're also looking to improve management processes for the use of inclusive excellence best practices and content that's shared in newsletters, web pages, and other messaging platforms. And I'm going to pass it off to Haley to go over the other 3 areas.
Thanks, Trevor. So for our 4th focus area, advocacy, we're trying to center on advocating for living wages, fair hiring practices, and just general transparency and employment opportunities for students specifically. On the next slide, you can see the goals that we've established in the first iteration. Those are around, first, equitable allocation of scholarship funds and employment fundings for students, and then improving the benefits and coverage that we have for students in a way that reflects one, our commitment to equity, but also a comprehensive understanding of health, mental, physical, emotional, and all the many different dimensions of wellness. And then we, again, want to increase transparency in how we communicate and provide access to job opportunities and also training opportunities for students. For our priorities in this area, we are centering more on collecting reliable information on hiring and funding across Gillings, across units, across departments. Practices vary. And so we want to establish a school-wide set of best practices and worst practices even, so that we can be on the same board together and moving forward in transparency with students. And then we want to utilize the school website. Many of you have already seen the school job posting site, and mechanisms like that to share opportunities, and then further improve our transparency around our processes to collect and address submissions that are put into the Student Equity and Feedback Concerns Forum that is facilitated by the Office of Student Affairs in partnership with Inclusive Excellence. And then for our next focus area, we have representation. In the first iteration of the plan, this was called diversity, but the focus of this area is to recruit and retain faculty, staff, and students from a wide range of backgrounds. And this includes professional backgrounds and also, personal identities and experiences. For the goals in this area, we seek to develop a community of faculty and staff and students that reflects those that we seek to engage in our research, in our practice, and in our service out in the community and across the globe. So taking that one step further, successful retention will also require, a more meaningful allocation of leadership positions across folks from different communities and different areas of expertise at the decision-making tables that exist across the school so that we can push forward together more equitably. And then for the current and ongoing representation priorities on the next slide, we are focused on improving communication across the school about our efforts. There's a lot that goes on in the way of inclusive excellence within our unit and in units and departments across the school that is not always communicated well, that is not always widely shared. So we want to improve that. And going off of that, we want to share, our successes that we found internally, but also that we've engaged with externally to help improve the efforts across the entire school. And then lastly, for the Inclusive Excellence Council, we want to make sure that we are improving our composition of the committees to reflect the larger Gillings community. That includes faculty, staff, students, and alumni across programs and across degree formats. And then for our sixth focus area, Yesenia mentioned that this one is new. So research is centered on dismantling racism and inequities in our personnel, in our practices, and our research portfolio overall. And then the goals for research are largely centered on equipping, researchers, students, and faculty at Gillings with the tools that they need to consistently apply equity, inclusive excellence, and anti-racism in their research. This will also require that we increase transparency about the research opportunities that exist for our students as well as we seek to build their professional development. And then lastly, our priorities for research include identifying and understanding what our current health equity and anti-racism, it is 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, so bear with me. But yeah, identifying and understanding what our current health equity and anti-racism efforts are around research, also building partnerships across schools with local HBCUs and then other institutions serving underrepresented communities, and clarifying the needs and expectations related to research mentorship to again further our commitment to professional development. And then on the next slide, I'm going to pass it back to Trevor to share a bit more about the progress we've made in the last couple years on the action plan.
Thanks, Haley. So as you can see on this slide, it's broken up into 6 rows, which represent our focus areas. And then in each of there's 3 columns here, with each representing a year from 2019 to 2021. So if you look at this, this first row here under training, you can see that in 2019, we began requiring 8 hours of employee training for faculty and staff. And then if you jump down to the 4th row in advocacy, you can see that in 2020, the student feedback and equity concerns tool was created. And if you jump back up to the 2nd row, In 2021, you can see the critical history of public health course was created and is offered now. And there's other accomplishments on here, which you can see that kind of just highlight the progress that Inclusive Excellence has made throughout the years. And if you look and you see some of these arrows for the last row, for example, in research, it was created in 2020. So that's what the arrows represent. And we can go to the next slide. And I'm gonna hand it to Yesenia to talk about evaluation.
I will actually be taking evaluation, and then I'm going to pass to Yesenia. Thanks, Trevor. Also, a note on the progress slide. It is very much abbreviated. A lot has happened in the past few years, but for the sake of usability, we wanted to be brief. A lot of the detail will be outlined in the next iteration of the plan that is coming out very soon. But for the next piece on evaluating the action plan, we can go to the next slide. So Inclusive Excellence in our evaluation efforts is situated as a part of the school-wide evaluation. And the measures for our evaluation plan were identified through feedback from student activism, conversations with the Dean's Council, discussions with the Inclusive Excellence Council, and then also in alignment with our 6 focus areas and the recommendations that came in the initial version of the plan. On the next slide, you can see a bit of a timeline. So we are currently in the pilot phase of our evaluation, focusing on establishing more concrete baseline measures and outcomes so we can better track our progress going forward. We want to set a good foundation, so that is really what we are focusing on right now. Our measures have been established and now data is being collected and analyzed, and we hope to be able to report on that soon enough. So more updates to come on that. Before we move to our Q&A portion, though, I will pass it right back to Yesenia to give us a quick summary, and then we will move to questions.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, and then you went on mute.
My Zoom has decided that it doesn't really want to work, so let's see how this continues to go. Just a quick summary, because we did want to leave as much time in this hour as we could for actual discussion. The action plan is a living document. It helps us focus our school-wide efforts. But as Haley alluded to before, this is something that requires a lot of hands on deck, more people than are in just the Inclusive Excellence unit, and it depends on action from everyone. We're currently in the process of compiling the pilot data that has been collected, filling in any gaps in data collection that we may have identified, and analyzing all of that. So that's the focus of this current semester. And just a note that we are recruiting for new members of the Inclusive Excellence Council. But with that, I am happy to turn it over to Elizabeth to moderate our Q&A.
Real quick, as Elizabeth is coming, and Elizabeth, I'm sorry for jumping in front of you, but I just wanted to thank Yesenia, Trevor, and Haley for all of their hard work in pulling together this this presentation. And the one thing we want to make sure that everyone is gaining from this presentation is that everyone plays a role in inclusive excellence. It is a part of the threading of Gillings. It is threaded throughout Gillings. And so it is important that you recognize that. And we've also ensured that departments and chairs and central administrative units also are engaged and involved in this. And so we've laid out the framework, or the Inclusive Excellence team has laid out the framework, but this is a part of how all of us function here at Gillings.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Yesenia. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to piggyback just a little bit on some of the things you all said before I start to go through some of the questions that we received in advance. So we saw the very high level scorecard, and it's just like if you can imagine a big iceberg underneath that tip, that is truly the tip of the iceberg in terms of both what this team has produced and lifted and shared with our school, but also what's going on in departments and different units. There's a big data dredge going on right now. I'm looking across reports from department chairs about their priorities for the past year, and we'll roll that up and share that out. As Yesenia emphasized, she's also pulling important data. We have some bits of data here to share with you. I have exciting news that our Assistant Dean for Strategic Analysis and Business Intelligence has worked on a dashboard, an interactive dashboard that will share data on student applications, admissions and enrollments. And so that will be publicly available soon. So we're excited about the levels of work going across all 6 of these domains.